This week's episode of Gundam Reconguista NG is decidedly old school in that good old-fashioned Gundam kind of way. The kind that we really liked watching back in the old days. The original Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta Gundam, 8th MS Team. It just sort of has that feel of the old school series, and a lot of that does have to do with the fact that the original creator of the series, Tomino, is working on this series, and it shows a lot. I was really confused by the first couple episodes of Reconguista NG just because things seemed a little muddled, they were going all over the place with the characters, and things just didn't seem to be falling into place quite yet. However, with the 4th episode, I do have a little more faith that this series is going to be one that's going to be fondly remembered. If anything, its designs, its mecha designs, its backgrounds and everything look fantastic. And this week's episode was great for a number of reasons. One, we outright know that the Capital Army is the enemy, because that's the name of the episode. We officially know that they're going to be the bad guys, and that's been built up over the course of the last couple episodes, showing the darker side of the Capital Army, and we even got to see there was that one guy who was going over the heads of people and allowing all of these crazy mobile suit experiments to go on so that they go off and start this war and try and find Bellry. It's a little convoluted in that sense, but it does lead to the introduction of our masked villain for this season. Yes, in the grand tradition of Char Aznable, we are going to have a masked villain for Reconguista NG, and it's obviously Luanne, who's that one character who was introduced in the first couple of episodes, who honestly I know nothing about. I couldn't tell you anything about this guy other than the fact that he has blue turquoise colored hair, he wears this badass, almost masquerade mask with 4 different eyes on it, and he just seems really charismatic and awesome. And that's exactly what we want from our Char clones. The story this week is real simple. It's basically just the Amerian army going up against the Capital Army, and an excuse to basically see Bellry go up against our masked villain for the first time. But it introduces a number of cool mobile suits. Let's talk about Luanne's mobile suit, which is the Elf Bullock, which almost looks like a robotic version of a chicken, because it's white, it's red, it has freaking high heel shoes, and it even happens to have a cock's crown right on the top. It looks like a big walking chicken. But it also happens to be a pretty interesting looking mobile suit, and one of the more differentiated ones that I've seen from the series so far. And it's also great because they need to make those distinctions to try and separate the difference between the Amerian mobile suits and the ones used by the Capital Army. But speaking of the Amerian mobile suits, there are a few new ones this week. We actually do get to see the Arcane in action this week, even though it doesn't really do too much. But we also get to see this other one, which kind of reminds me of a Zaku. It's like big and purple. I believe it's called the Hecate. It has this one massive gun, and it has like the style of the Zaku or the Dom's face. And I just like the look of it in general. I'm not sure if it's a reference to an old mobile suit. It sort of slips my mind at the moment because there's just so many mobile suits in this series, it's hard to keep up. But for the most part, it seems like every mobile suit in this series is completely unique to this one and has like its own design, aside from that one fan service scene in the 2nd episode where you saw the Museum of Mobile Suits. Otherwise, the other thing that's really cool about this episode is the battle at the end, because we get to see Luanne going up against Klimnik, and it's really exciting because they're both really capable pilots, but neither one of them actually outshines the other. I mean, Klimnik's mobile suit, the Montero, does lose its head in battle, but he continues to fight back. The G-Self also gets to have a really great scene this week where we actually get to learn that it has a core fighter, or a core within it, that can actually launch out and go back in, and it was hinted at in the earlier episodes, but it's just another nice callback to the original Mobile Suit Gundam. And there's a great sequence which also happens to be thrilling and funny at the same time. Thrilling just because it's a great mobile suit battle and it has a lot of style, but it's funny because Bellry actually ends up saving this Amerian pirate who is stuck to the core the entire time, even when they dock inside the Gundam, and he goes up fighting against the Elf Bullock, and he actually uses 2 beam sabers at once and like spins his hands around to deflect all of the attacks, in a really flashy and awesome scene. And he can also extend the actual beam sabers themselves, which is something that has been hinted at in the earlier episodes as well. Otherwise, this was a great episode. It was a little simple, and it was very dialogue-heavy, but that's typical for these Tomino Gundam anime series. But I like it, though. This episode really solidified my love of the series, mostly for the art style and just the uniqueness of it all. I love the Amerian space pirate ship. It's so awesome. At first, when I saw it, my first thought was, oh, it's basically just a red version of White Base, the typical big spaceships that we've seen in all the Gundam anime. It's actually much more like a typical pirate ship. It even has these big techno-like fans which extend from the sides, and it just really gives it a lot of style, and I definitely knew this was an old-school Gundam anime when it ends with the ship flying up into space and that's the last thing you see. It totally just gives me this weird old-school Gundam feeling, and fans who've been watching a lot of the old-school Gundam anime will know exactly what I'm talking about. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Gundam Reconguista NG? Very good episode. Easily my favorite episode of the series thus far. It was a lot easier to follow. There was a much easier story to see this week, and we're starting to learn a little bit more about really what's going on in this story. Basically, Bellry is just trying to return to the Capital Army, but he also doesn't want to hurt the Amerian pirates. These are not your typical "Arr" pirates that we're used to seeing. They're clearly not very violent, even though they do have the ability to fight back and they are capable, but they're clearly trying to bring about some sort of revolution that has something to do with the Capital Army, which they're not getting into quite yet. And I've already mentioned in my previous reviews, there's a lot of like religious implications and imagery they use with them, and always when they use that type of stuff for like a big government organization, it just always paints them as evil. And it's always interesting to see the dynamic of the fact when you have two people who used to be teammates going up against each other. I'm also really glad to see that we are going to have a masked villain for the show. It was sort of spoiled in the ending of the show, and it's very obvious it's Luanne, especially because, one, he looks just like him, but when he's actually introduced for the first time, the one cheerleader who works for the Capital Army, Manny, actually mentions, I haven't seen Luanne today. It just put all the pieces together, guys. It's right there for you. My other favorite thing about this week's episode is the mobile suits. I love them. I love the designs of them. I love the color schemes of them. They're all so distinct from one another, and they have ridiculously goofy names. The Elf Bullock is an interesting mobile suit because of its transformation sequences and the weird jet boosters that it can have on its back when it's in mid-flight, and just the actual look of the mobile suit is unique. Like I said, it looks like a big chicken. Just the high heels and the freaking like red coxcomb right on the top, just it reminds me of a big chicken, a big fighting chicken, but it's awesome. I really cannot wait to see all of the different upgrades that Luanne's mobile suits are going to get as the series is going on, and story-wise, I imagine it's only a matter of time before Bellry notices the real evil within the Capital Army, whatever the hell that is. They're not really getting into that quite yet, but this episode was literally called "The Capital Army is the Enemy." So we already know that they're going to be the villains, and these space pirates do not seem bad at all. They did a great job of actually showing us what the crew is going to be like. And the captain of the ship, he has the coolest captain seat ever. It's got this busty blonde painted on it. It's hilarious. It says a lot about his ridiculous personality. And there's also a really strange scene where the actual pilot of the ship has this weird confrontation with Ida, where they almost seem like lovers, almost. Maybe they just have a sisterly relationship, but that's the way it came across to me, and they don't follow up on it. The captain notices it, and they do focus on it. It's a little strange. They don't even introduce that character, but still, this is just planting the seed for another story arc later in this series. What I will say is, this was a gorgeous episode with much better direction, great mobile suit action, a little all over the place with like when they want to try and be serious and when they want to try to be funny, but clearly this is a show that is trying to have a little bit of fun that's obvious from the mid-title cards where you see the characters jumping in like ballerinas dancing. Otherwise, if you're an old school Gundam fan, check this one out. You're definitely going to appreciate all of the old school factor of the show. You're going to love the new mobile suits. And those who are brave and new to Gundam anime, I do recommend the show. It is a little confusing and a little heavy-handed, especially with some of the terms they use, like Tawasanga, but still, I think it's definitely worth it, and it definitely just has some beautiful animation, and if you like mecha, just check it out. So I'm going to give this week's episode a 4 out of 5. Check it out, guys. Really good episode that is beginning of a really awesome and classic Gundam anime series. Thank you guys for watching my review. If you like this video, make sure and give it a thumbs up and like the video. Before you guys leave, please tell me what you thought about this week's episode of Reconguista NG. Did you guys have a favorite new mobile suit? Favorite action scene? What do you want to see from the future of this series? And is there some sort of plot twist with the masked villain, Luanne? Is it not really Luanne? Is it obvious enough that it is? Just please tell me with your comments below. And before you guys leave, please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. You can do that by clicking on the channel icon right up here. You guys can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter.